All right, welcome back to the Ottawa studios of Inside My Canoe Head. I am your host, Dr. D. Today, we start our promised 5-part series on your roadmap to resilience. So sit back, grab yourself your favorite beverage. This is all for you. So let's get at her. Chick, I love percussion beats. Who doesn't? Listen, thanks again for joining us, and welcome to the series. We promised many minutes ago, if you are a avid listener, that we would put together for Preparedness Month a roadmap to resilience. And what this is our efforts to bring together all of the ideas that exist out there in the preparedness and roadmap. And we'll get into the NOS and the idiocy that surrounds preparedness and resilience on the internet. But really, if I was to say to you, and this was something odd and confusing to you, but that you were somebody who was not very happy about the state of chaos, chaotic events, political, economical, cultural, ideological, and natural disasters happening around us all the time, you're like, I'm getting a little sick and tired of getting punched upside the head. What can I do about it? That's the purpose of the roadmap for resilience, to set a stage and a roadmap for you to follow, a pathway to you to go from where you are now to a position where you are far more resilient to exogenous shocks, things that happen beyond your control. So when you get punched upside the head, you can parry it. If it does brush you, it's an awfully slight impact, and you can carry on doing, for the most part, exactly what you did before. That's what it is. Now, why is this different from the rest of the idiotic NOS that exists on the internet? Well, let's be clear. If you listen to the internet, society, especially YouTube, society is about to collapse. Preppers are telling you to build bunkers or get off-grid properties, get into a communal. We even make HBO and different movies, Homestead and different things like that, about what we think might be a viable idea or ideology or frame or community to put together for some type of an apocalyptic outcome. Basically, they are begging and hoping and praying and otherwise supporting the idea that society is going to collapse. Now, there's two reasons behind that. One, if you look at the science, and I'll get into the explanation of why science matters in a bit, but for now, when you look at the science into ideologically grounded preppers, it comes back of one of two things. It comes back of one, that they are having they're an individual or a group of individuals who has difficulty integrating with the modern society and what it's become. Whether they like it or not, they just have difficulty integrating it. That's not the roadmap they want society to follow. It doesn't look the way they want it to, and their efforts are insufficient to change it. In other words, they're inactive, they're political, they're trying their best, but in the end, it just turns out to be the way that they don't like. The second part of it is there's an economic motive, and a lot behind a lot of the channels that you will find on the internet. When they talk about societal collapse, when they talk about bug out bags, when they talk about top 10 things every new prepper should buy and things like that, there are two motives. There's an economic motive behind it, but it comes in two presents. One, they actually have a commodity to sell to you. In other words, they have affiliate links, or they have a product that they've created that they think if you would just do this or buy this from me, you'll become prepared. And the second part is they use the fear motivation to generate subscriptions to YouTube. And at a certain level, of monetization, YouTube is helpful, right? It can start providing some real and actual income to people when you get up to a certain level of views and quantity of hours watched. It can start to provide some serious, and there's been a number of preppers that have made the switch from part-time channel producers to full-time content creators, and literally have sold their properties, moved into the bush, bought a homestead, gone completely off-grid, and are filming all these prepping videos, and it's funding their family. Now, in a modern, capitalistic society, I'm absolutely all about that. But what I want you to know is that when you look at the majority of what you find on the internet, you need to look at it through the frame of what is the purpose and the intent. And why we position ourselves differently here at Inside My Canoe Head and our parent company, Preparedness Labs Incorporated, is we have no profit motive. Right? This roadmap to resilience is grounded in science, and it's free of charge. We don't believe that there should be socioeconomic barriers. We don't believe that there should be a payment plan for preparedness. We don't think that's appropriate. We know absolutely without question that there is not correlation between the acquisition of goods, services, and supplies to a level of preparedness, but that it's based in skills, attitude, personal responsibility, and building a community. And all of that is integrated into what we're going to talk about over the next 5 series and 5 episodes that come out on this podcast. Now, each episode, including today's, has a Substack article, and it's up on Substack already. Then we record the podcast episode related to it. And then we're going to later today and release a YouTube video talking about it. So we're going to give you the opportunity to consume this information in the written format, in this audio format here on the podcast, as well as to go over to our YouTube channel and to watch it. The idea being is this is free. This is our community service to you, to the served population, that if you truly want, you're tired of the chaotic nonsense that's going on, you have no idea where to find logical and intelligent analysis on the internet and in prepper and YouTube channels, I'm offering this to you. What we do here at Preparedness Labs Incorporated and what I present to you on Inside My Canoe Head, this podcast, is non-apocalyptic evidence-based preparedness education. Now, non-apocalyptic means I know based upon the evidence that we do not have sufficient cause for concern about the collapse of modern technological society. The probability of that is not 0, but the probability of anything is not 0. But that it is not a logical, based upon the probability and statistical modeling that's done, it is not a logical likely outcome for which people need to be concerned. What people do need to be concerned about is what is logical and what is likely to occur. And this is what we base and what we mean by science. Now, science as a word and science as an idea took quite the arse kicking, as we say in the East Coast, during the pandemic, and rightfully so, because settled science and a whole bunch of ridiculous phrases were misused and abused by everybody on all sides of the pandemic and vaccine arguments. The point being is science is never settled. Anybody who tells you that science is settled doesn't understand science. Science is simply the expression of knowledge as we understand it today, based upon not what we think and not what we believe, but science is based upon evidence, and evidence is only from experimentations that we have done. Now, science is divided loosely into the natural sciences, which would be your physics, your chemistry, your geography, things that exist in the physical medium. Then we have social sciences, which generally understands and examines the human animal and the human species and how it tends to interact and operate. So, science is equal and the scientific method is similar. It's exactly the same in both, whether you're dealing with natural or social sciences. And what science does is we test hypothesis. Hypothesis is what I think I'm likely to find if I was to conduct experiment X, or I was to come to a town in Appalachia and ask 10 questions to 100 people. Before I do that experiment, I'm going to come up with a hypothesis. What is it that I think I'm likely to find? And why do I think I'm likely to find that? Because the last time these set of questions were asked, this is what came, and my personal belief bringing it together, and it's an expression of my bias. But when we test hypothesis and then find the results of it, and then we write research articles based upon scientific modeling and statistical modeling of the data, the results, we get things we can call one of two things, which is a correlation or a causation. Causation is the gold standard and the gold standard to reach in science, and it's rarely ever present. Causation means that I can say, because A happened, B will happen. If we were to replicate these circumstances over and over again, A causes B. Normally, what we come out with is a level of correlation. And a level of correlation is a spectrum. If you think about it, loosely correlated or tightly correlated or weakly or strongly correlated, pick whatever you want. It basically means that when this variable or this event is happening, this is likely to happen as well. And so when we talk in science about correlation, it's when we talk about the world as we understand it today until we get different information, right? We believe we're alone in the universe until somebody lands on Parliament Hill in Ottawa and tells us differently, right? The point here is that to understand the value of science is to understand that it is only as good as the knowledge we have today, and that something that occurs tomorrow or an experiment that's done tomorrow could and likely will change our level and our standard of knowledge, our standard of confidence, whether it's weak or strong confidence in that correlation or otherwise. Basically, when I talk about I give you evidence-based preparedness education means what I'm offering is not my opinion or belief. It is what the evidence and the data tells us. Now, to make this series, we went back and looked over 30 years of research into the philosophy, as I call it, of preparedness, the idea of resilience, and then we also has conducted over the last 2 years a number of important experiments and research projects here at the parent company, Preparedness Labs Incorporated, and we've reached a point where we think we can put together an imperfect roadmap. And we say imperfect because science is imperfect, right? Nothing is magical. Nothing is the final thing you'll ever have to do this and life will be perfect. But what we're offering you is this 5-part series that is based upon evidence. And as the knowledge base exists today and the body and scientific knowledge related to the fields of preparedness and resilience, this process is what emerges as the most likely helpful course of action for somebody who is actively interested in not getting punched up by upside the head, as Mike Tyson would say, about the next political, economic, cultural, ideological, or natural event that causes chaos and uncertainty in our lives. So, all that preamble aside, that's what this entire series is about. So today we want to talk about part 1 of the series, which simply is understanding the world around us. It's about history and framing of the current environment. And so the idea when we look at this is to understand that the world in the modern context is technologically enabled and interconnected and intertwined. If you look at our modern functioning economy and our modern functioning society, it is largely urban, depending on where you're listening to this podcast. And it's downloaded in 111 countries around the world. We're urbanizing. Humanity is urbanizing at an extent to which we've never done as a species before. So the vast majority of human beings on this earth live in urban environments. There are always going to be people who are exceptional statistical outliers, but the majority of us live in societies that have these interconnections. And these interconnections and support structures is what we call critical infrastructure. And those are the key sectors that allow the systems that permit our modern society to function. And the first part of step 1 of your roadmap to resilience journey is understanding the frame that we're going to present you. And the frame begins with the idea that you live in a modern technologically enabled society whose critical infrastructure systems permit it to exist. And if you think about every morning when you get up, think about all of the systems that you count on, all of the systems that you just expect and assume will work. You got up, you flipped the light switch, you expected the light to come on. You flushed the toilet, you expected something to go down and the water to refill. You turned on the tap, you expected potable water, right? You flipped on your iPhone, You expected to have a Wi-Fi connection in your home, and if not, a cellular data connection that was going. You expected to check the bus and that public transit was running this morning. You expect that if you call 911 that somebody will be there. You expect that somebody's in a hospital emergency room waiting for you should you have an accident, and that police, fire, paramedics are all at the standby should you need assistance, and that the government is operating and government assistance and government operations are continuing on, that when you go get your coffee in the morning from your favorite little coffee store, that when you tap your card, the point of sale system will work, connected to the internet, and the financial system in which you depend upon will not fail. I could go on and on for an hour about the different critical infrastructure sectors and elements thereof that keep the modern society going. But if you just think about all of those elements that you just count on every single day, and I do the same thing, those are your critical infrastructures. Now, here in Canada, they're divided into 10 sectors. In the United States of America, they're divided into 16. In some European, it's more, it's less. And in some jurisdictions, they're referred to as lifelines. However you're going to quantify it, however you're going to qualify it, and whatever nomenclature you want to use, these systems are essential to the functioning of a modern technologically enabled society, the one in which you live. So, understanding that, we need you to hoist aboard, as we say, as the Navy friends would say, and understand that an emergency happens when you lose access to one or more sectors of critical infrastructure. So if society continues to operate, emergencies don't exist. Emergencies happen when you lose access to one of the sectors of society, one of the sectors of critical infrastructure, or one of the elements. And this is going to look different for absolutely everybody out there. So if you think about how we all individually live our lives, one point, and I use this in presentations, around the country, is if I shut down public transit and you don't take public transit, you're likely in the very short term to not notice anything different. In the medium term, you'll start seeing a whole bunch more people driving cars and on the road, and traffic will get gridlocked. But for a short period of time, it's inconsequential to you, right? But not if you're somebody who lives in one side, in the west end of a city, and has to take public transit for an hour to the east end of the city to earn an income, and they're a salaried employee, they're a wage employee, which means if they don't show up, they don't get paid. And for a lot of people in today's economic woes in society, losing, a couple of days of pay is significant to their ongoing family economic and financial health. So as you can see, and now if I looked at all of the 10 sectors of critical infrastructure and laid them out in front of you, and then I said, here are the 4 subheadings, and I was to ask you a series of 40 questions about your exposure to and dependency on this piece of critical infrastructure and the element within it. And then if loss of access to that, would that cause you significant disruption? And if it would, you've now found the cause of an emergency. So if we understand that, right, that's an important frame, because as we build this roadmap to resilience, we're going to talk about how you mitigate and how you reduce your exposure to and dependency on these elements of critical infrastructure to limit the effect when they go down. So when an emergency happens and a loss of critical infrastructure occurs, because you're more resilient, because you adopted preparedness and followed the ideas that we'll lay out over the month of May, that impacts you less. You have less of an impact, and your ability to bounce back to pre-event normal state of operations is far quicker than everybody else. And that's the point we're trying to get to. The roadmap to resilience does not and never could completely protect you from exogenous shocks. Exogenous shocks are events that happen beyond your control but impact your life, right? So a pandemic, a political tariff decision if you run a business that sends things across a border. These are things you can't control, but they impact you. Now, if you adopt preparedness and build personal resiliency, then those things, as they occur, because they will and you can't control them, they have less of an impact on you and you bounce back quicker. And eventually you can get preparedness to a point where there is very little disruption in your life, irrespective of the event that occurs, other than significant total loss events, like, a wildfire wiping out your town. You are still going to be bouncing back faster than everybody else because you are resilient. And that's the roadmap's intent. But for that intent to be successful, we have to make you understand that we're framing the discussion around you live in a modern, technologically enabled society. You are integrated and exposed to and dependent on all these sectors of critical infrastructure. So if we use that as the frame and we examine your world through that lens, and we look at how we can help you mitigate, how we can help put barriers and protection in there, you will have a more resilient life. Now, the second part of that is understanding what exists in society around you to assist. Now, within public agencies, and it sometimes it's called civil defense, but in the majority of places in modern democracies around the world, it's now some form of emergency management. It's the public sector's effort to ameliorate the impacts of events that are beyond your control. So when sectors of critical infrastructure go down, and it doesn't matter why, right? We're not concerned whether it's a tornado or a hurricane or a flood or anything like that. We just know that your sectors of CI went down. We know that you've been impacted, and the government has developed a system or a capability called emergency management that is there to assist. Now, there are two portions of what happens in an emergency. The first one is called incident response, and this is your police, fire, and EMS. So those are the regular operations of police, fire, and EMS that happens in almost every society or city around the world. And they are staffed for what is a normal level of calls for service during a given period of time in a certain jurisdiction. So the NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association, puts out actual standards for the number of firefighters per capita based upon the type. The government may invest in specialty capabilities, etc. But incident response is the function of the police, fire, and EMS responding to calls for service, and they're built in. They usually have a short-term minor surge capability for one-off events, like if they have a major fire in a downtown or a major plant failure or something. They have that capability built in. Emergency management as a function is something different. It's called incident management, or IM. Incident management is the function of supporting the incident responders, so they call them the incident commander, but the IR function, the police, fire, and EMS on the ground, saving lives and dealing with the incident on the coalface, are supported by incident management through a series of expertise, a series of experts, a series of professionals, usually in the form of an emergency operations center that both communicates with the public. This group of experts will plan for the next 24, next 48 hours, and they will provide data, information, and advice to the elected officials who have to make important decisions related to what is going to happen next, what to tell the public, and what our possible courses of action may be. So incident management is a function of emergency management. Now, it is dictated and present in pretty much every level of government, irrespective of where you live in the world. So your local, your subnational, your national government, to some degree, have a function of incident management called emergency management or civil defense or something along that lines that provides that oversight to support the people at the coalface dealing with the emergency and to support decision-making, etc. That's very important to understand. Now, I'm going to say this, and this is crystal clear for those in the back in the cheap seats. I have absolute respect for the people executing the functions within emergency management, the incident response and the incident management folks. I have absolutely respect for them, and I support what they do. Many of them are my friends, and I have the pleasure of calling them colleagues. They are professionals, they are practitioners, and they are dedicated to their served population. I will not stand by and have somebody besmirch the reputation of people who do such great and noble work and warrior work for us. However, as good as they are and as noble and well intent as they are, public sector resources are finite, right? They are both finite in capability and finite in their capacity, which is the extent into which they can do. They are time limited. This is very important for you to understand. Your city has, or you're supporting this technologically enabled society that you live in. When there's a failure in critical infrastructure, the public sector has some form of capability to deal with it, but that capability has limitations. And there will be some point, irrespective of whatever the demands from the public will be, that the capability of the public sector will simply run out. You will simply have no more firefighters. There'll be nobody at the end of 9/11. When you call them. There'll be nobody, no ambulances to come to your rescue. There'll be none of that. That will all have been consumed by the event that it's ongoing. Now, municipalities will have mutual aid agreements with neighboring communities, assuming they're not affected by the same event, that they will be able to provide assistance. But there is a very real limitation on the capability and capacity of public sector incident response and incident management, which creates the third lesson or the third portion of step one, is understanding the preparedness gap. That is the space between what the public sector can do to ameliorate the losses as a result of an event and the needs that the population may have. So there will be a needs gap there. The things the population needs somebody to do to help them, and there's nobody there to do it for them because the government assets are consumed to their maximum capability. That's the preparedness gap. The goal of the roadmap to resilience is to teach you the skills and knowledge so that we close that gap, so that that gap becomes smaller, so that you are able to navigate that gap with little or no external assistance. And if it is external assistance, it's going to be from your neighborhood, your social networks, and the connections that you make, right? Your ability to be successful in emergency is largely dependent on your social connections and your community connections. That's later on in step 5. But here in step 1, we need you to understand that this preparedness gap exists. It's a space where the best of intentions can't fill, and you either go without your needs being met, or you decide that you want to do something about those needs and be capable of providing the needs for yourself, your family, your business, your community, and your neighborhood, right? Because these conditions cross over into whether you're a solo entrepreneur, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you work at a business or not. When we think of the community that's affected, we understand that the businesses are just as affected as the people, right? Their operations are disrupted, their operations are shut down, and they need to recover as well because people need income. We'll get into your trifecta of preparedness plans that deal with a disaster, but during an emergency, that preparedness gap needs to be filled. So the summation of your roadmap to resilience, the step 1, is for you to understand and accept that you live in a modern technologically enabled society whose systems, whose critical infrastructure systems are the reason why it operates as well as it does. And that when those do fail, your exposure to and dependency on it may create an emergency on your part because you lose access to something that is critical to you being able to conduct your life and operate the way you want to. The public sector has a capability that can step in to deal with some of these losses, but that capability is time limited and will expire, which leaves a capability gap, an expression of unmet needs that you and your family and your community have in a disaster that can't be met by the government and public sector services, that now have to either be ignored and abandoned, which means you just suffer and take it pain, like Mike Tyson says, getting repeatedly punched upside the head, or you decide to make a cognitive and logical intervention to learn skills and knowledge, build your social networks and connections that close that preparedness gap to the point where you get your resilience to a certain degree to where you are not affected hardly at all when an event happens. So the gold standard is never to zero impact, because zero impact is not possible. When a significant event happens that's beyond your control and affects you, when you adopt this roadmap to resilience, when you build your preparedness levels, you increase your resilience, which simply means the impact you'll feel because of an event will be far less, and your ability to recover will be far shorter than those who have chosen not to take the time and effort of investment into preparedness. And one last caveat on this: when I talk about investment, I want to be crystal clear, and this will be throughout the remainder, other than one very small case in step 3. Preparedness is free. It does not require the investment of any money. There are no goods that will increase your preparedness level. There is absolutely no economic barrier to preparedness. That is a creation of the state, because the state is telling you to buy things and collect goods, put them in emergency kit, and that is one of the things you do to increase preparedness. Yet, as a scientist, there is absolutely zero evidence to support there is any truth behind that communication. Zero evidence behind it. So no, I am not going to advocate for you to buy a certain thing. So if anybody listening to thinks they're suffering an economic hardship and that means they can't adopt preparedness, I'm here to tell you that is absolutely incorrect. And that is the state illogically transferring responsibility without knowledge. But that will be dealt with later in some of the follow-on steps. So the end of today is successful. When you view society as an interconnected web of critical infrastructure that may fail, and if it fails, sometimes fails cascadingly together, and then as you lose access to certain segments or certain sectors of critical infrastructure, that it may constitute an emergency for you, depending on how you live your life. That is a key. Then understanding that emergency management as an incident management function exists to manage a situation on behalf of the public sector, that incident response exists from police, fire, and EMS to deal with the immediacy of the event, but that both those things have finite boundaries at which, no matter what the best of intent is from the people in the public service, they simply won't be able to provide assistance. That creates a preparedness gap. That preparedness gap is the goal of the roadmap to resilience, is to give you the skills and knowledge to close that, to be able through those skills and knowledge and your relationships with the community and organizations around you, to be able to get your personal state from your personal, your family, your business, your community, and your neighborhood to a state where the effect of the event is nominal, and the time to bounce back to a state of pre-event normalcy is exceptionally short. In other words, it is almost a non-event for the prepared and the resilient individual. I hope this was helpful for you. We're over on Substack under Jeff Donaldson. If you go over to YouTube under @Preparedness Labs, there's a YouTube channel there where the video version of this will be up later today. We're going to do this 5-part series in each of 3 formats to deliver to you, to provide absolutely free, unquestioned, unapologetically science and evidence-based, non-apocalyptic assistance for you. That's our goal. The best stuff should be out there, and it should be free of charge. So hopefully you enjoyed it. If you do like all that other stuff, but share it with somebody. Really, this is free, great community information. There's no ad revenue whatsoever that I get from this. You're not assisting my pocketbook by sharing it. You're helping everybody get this free information for them to understand. And if we're successful after all 5 steps, it will be out there in a playlist for people to simply watch and understand how they adopt a prepared life. So thank you very much for joining us this episode here at Inside My Canoe Head. We're having a great season 14. I hope this emerging spring for us in the Northern Hemisphere and for all my friends in the Southern Hemisphere, I hope you enjoyed summer. You're headed for winter, my friends. Take care and stay safe.